Hello students, this is Mrs. Girot and I am here to teach you how to complete the week 1 assignment. First, get into your digital arts classroom. You can use this drop down box to find that, and then you will click on content. That will put you here in this view where you have a table of contents. If you are just getting started, there is an orientation, recording, and quiz that needs to be taken. Here's the video and the quiz. Right click on the quiz, open that in a new window, and then watch the recording as you take the quiz at the same time. If you're not sure how to use the Dropbox, that video illustrates it. If you're not sure what my class schedule is, there's my schedule, and here is my contact information, just as a quick overview. This is the week 1 folder. If you click on that, you'll notice there's a week 1 lesson and test. Ultimately, you should be completing that lesson and test before you do the assignment. You want to work in order. Notice the first thing on there is to download Inkscape. By going to inkscape.org, it gives instructions, and if you run into any technical issues, please call 866-K12-CARE. They are there to help. Read the directions carefully, watch the videos, right-click on the week 1 test, open it in a new window as you complete the lessons in a separate window. They go together. Once you've completed the week 1 lesson and test, you're ready for the week 1 assignment. Click here, and then you will notice that once again, in the event that you forgot to download Inkscape, you have the directions there. It tells you to create a digital arts folder so that you can save your work and to follow the directions in the Dropbox, which is here. There's also a video tutorial that you can use to complete the assignment. Directions. You're going to create a composition that is either representational or abstract using the tools you learned about in the video tutorial. I recommend creating this composition as you are watching the tutorial, pausing it as you go to practice the tools and work your composition. Before you start working, save and close out anything on your computer that you don't want to lose if your computer crashes. Inkscape uses a lot of memory, so the first thing you need to do is save your file and then keep on saving over and over again every time you do something. If it crashes, you'll be happy you don't have to go back and redo everything. Watch the video tutorial as you practice noodling around with the tools in an Inkscape window. Save, save, save. After you've noodled around, put together a well-balanced composition. It could be representational or abstract. The choice is yours, but make it artful and soulful. I will anonymously share your artwork in the critique. Make sure you click Save one last time once you've finished and submit your Inkscape file to the Dropbox. And there's that video once again that shows you how to submit to the Dropbox. Here is the rubric. This is how you earn your points. So notice it says it's 100 points possible, and this says that each one of these is worth 10 points. So what I like to do is I like to grab my snipping tool. If it doesn't show up there, just type in snipping and it will come up here and you can just click on it. Once it says new, your screen's going to go a little funny. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a box around all of those items in the rubric that I need to complete. And then it's just saved right there on my snipping tool clipboard, and I will be able to refer to that to make sure I complete everything in the rubric and get full credit. So I have 2 monitors, so I'm going to stick that over on my second monitor where I can still see it. And I don't need this any longer. It's time to open Inkscape. I have mine down on my shortcuts bar at the bottom of my page. You may have it here in your programs. You might have it on your desktop. And if you don't find it, you can just put in your search Inkscape and it will come in here, and you can just click on it to open it. Great. Once you are in there, go ahead and take and open up your layers by clicking on the layer menu at the top. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and click layers, and you'll notice that opens over here. You can find these arrows and drag the layers window a little larger so you can see your layers clearly. Remember, the first thing I said to do was to save. So click Save As and find the folder where you're going to save your work. I save mine under pictures, and I have a digital arts folder, and here's my 2016-17 school year and week 1, and I will call this Inkscape video tutorial, and that is block 2, 16-17 school year. Perfect. The other thing is you might feel like your palette or canvas, rather, your canvas is a little too small. Go to View, Zoom, and you can do the whole page, and that will fill your page. There's a shortcut for that if you want to memorize that. Notice shortcuts are over here. So 5, if I just press the 5, it should go back. There's also a zoom in the bottom right-hand corner. I can make it smaller, and let's hit my 5, and yep, I hit 5 and it went right to the whole page size. This is your toolbox over here, and you've got several tools. When you hover your cursor, it will tell you what they are. This is the Select and Transform Objects tool. Anytime you want to resize an object, move it around the canvas, rotate it. This is your Rectangle tool. This is your 3D tool. We're not going to use that one. This is your Create Circles, Ellipses, and Arcs, your Stars and Polygons, a Spiral tool we're not going to use today, and this is your freehand drawing tool that we will be using today. You can explore the other tools as much as you like. So for my first layer, I'm going to start with the first item on the rubric, which is rectangles and squares. So I'm just going to click on that layer, double click it, and I'm going to type rectangles and squares. And if I want to make sure that that layer is active, so click on it and it becomes blue. There's a lock. I can lock it so that changes can't be made to it. I'm going to keep it unlocked. And there's also an eye, which means that it's visible, or I can close the eye and it'll be invisible. You can't see that right now because there isn't anything on the layer. So let's add some rectangles. So grab your rectangle tool, and you're just gonna click the cursor down and hold it as you drag, and you'll notice that it's gonna fill it with an arbitrary color, in whatever the last color that you drew was, okay? And it's also gonna create these handles. So if you wanna change the fill color, you can notice down here at the bottom, there's a little box that says fill. You can click on that. You should be, yeah, and then you'll notice that if I click on that little blue, that brings up this fill and stroke. And my favorite way to change a color, besides just going down to the palette and just clicking there, which you can do, is to use this wheel over here. So you notice it's on RGB, red, green, blue right now, which means you can use these sliders to adjust the colors. Like if I want to add more red to it, I can. If I want to add more white to it, I can. If I want to add more blue, I can. So you can adjust it that way. This is also kind of an opacity tool, so if I want to make it more transparent, I can. There's also opacity built in down here, which will make the entire layer, well, that entire rectangle anyway, is going to become opaque. 100% opacity means that you can't see through it. 0% opacity means that it's transparent. I can see right through it, okay? And then for your layer, this is what I meant. In your layers box, you can also change the opacity of the entire layer itself. So anything on there would become opaque. Those are just some fun tools. But my favorite tool for changing the color, as I was getting back to that, is make sure you've got fill, because this is a fill, right? It's colored in, it's filled in, is the wheel. I like the wheel because you can just grab this point and move it around inside, or I can take this outer handle and I can move it. And so I think that's a really fun way to pick colors personally. You can decide how you want to do it. There's tons of ways to get colors. Another way to get colors is to use an eyedropper tool, and you'll learn how to do that later in class. Now, is there an outline for this shape? Let's find out. So I'm going to grab that Select and Transform tool I told you about. Notice it creates handles. Guess what the handles do? They allow you to change the size of it. You can have a lot of fun with that, right? But it's also going to allow me to just take a look at the stroke on there. So I'm clicking off of it, and it does look like it has kind of a black outline. Let's find out. Stroke is outline. Doesn't seem to have one. I have to select the actual shape. Hold on. So yes, when I actually have used that tool to select it, it does say that it has a stroke on it. That's what this means. If there's an X right there, that means it doesn't have a stroke, but it does. If I don't want it to have a stroke, I can click on the X and it'll go away. But it did have a stroke, so let's look at stroke style. And if you want to increase the outline or the stroke width, you're just going to use this and arrow it up, and watch as I do that. You'll be able to, and that's how you can create a border. So let's say if I'm trying to create a border on this page. This is my project, and I'm creating a rectangle here that has a really nice border. That border is too big for me anyway. I don't need it that large. I'm just going to go ahead and make it so that the outer edge fills the canvas, and there we have my border. Well, let's say, well, I don't really like that color green for my fill, so I can just pick any color that I want for my fill, right? So select that, and I can go down to the bottom, and I can change the color down here to anything that I want it to be. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it like that. So I have a nice rectangle, right? And I've changed the colors of it. And so I've done this part right here. I'm just gonna take my highlighter and I go, okay, that part's done. Now I need to make a square. So the control button on your keyboard does exactly what it says. It controls things. So anytime you have something that you need to control, try hitting the control button. Now this is going to be an example of how Inkscape will keep those defaults for whatever you just did, which was to make a rectangle with a blue thick outline and a pink shape. So watch when I go to draw my square what happens. Hold down the control button, click and hold and drag, and you'll notice that it not only holds a square, but it'll hold a couple of different proportions too. So if you want the square, just look for the one that looks like the square, and then you can drag that square as big as you want it. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it like that. And it saved those properties of that rectangle. If you don't want those properties, you can just go up to the top and click up here. Well, that would work for other tools, but not the rectangle tool. Usually there's a little reset button right here. So if we want to change it, we're just going to have to go in and do that. So if I want to change the stroke color, I can use my wheel if I want to. And I think I'm just going to make that a lighter pink so I can tell that I changed the color of it. And I'm going to go to stroke style, and I'm just going to make that border smaller. And I want to show you how to change the stroke color. You can do it here. You can change the stroke color here, right? Let's find out. Yeah, there. See how I'm changing it right now? That's one way to do it. And you might also think that since I've got the stroke paint tab selected, that I could just go down here and pick a color. But I was wrong, right? Because even though the stroke tab is selected, if I click down here, this is always going to just change the fill unless I'm holding down the shift key. I'm going to hit Control Z as in zebra. That's going to be your best friend. It's your undo tool, and it'll go back and undo several steps. So hitting Control Z brought that fill back to the light pink. And now I'm going to demonstrate if I do hold down my shift button, and now I click on a color in the palette, aha, it changes the outline. So just remember, if you want to change your outline, you've got to hold the shift key down. Okay, so now I'm going to grab these guys right here. Well, I could kind of show you what these other handles did first, sorry. So if I grab this one, that means I can change the shape of it, right? I'm going to hit Control Z because I do need to have a square to get credit, right? So I'm holding down Control so that when I go to move it, it'll maintain the square proportions. And I can tell the whether or not it's a square because when I look up here at the top, it's going to show me the width and the height. And if it's a square, the width and the height need to be identical, right? So if I'm just trying to like get away with something and go, that looks like a square, no, it's not. The width is 340 and the height is 359. It might visually look like one, but it's not. So hold down that control button as you move it, and that'll get your square proportion for you. Actually, it's totally out of proportion now. So I'm going to hit Control Z until I get back to the square that I had before. Okay, Control Z is a good friend to have. Now this other little handle is going to let you round the corners. It could even let you take it to a circle. That's one way to make a circle, or just rounded corners on a square or rectangle. Now remember, if I leave that like that, what's my next one gonna look like that I draw? Oh, notice it's gonna have the rounded, and it doesn't have fill of pink inside because the last time I drew I actually did have green on the inside. So that's kind of what's going on there. Let's say I don't want those rounded corners. This is what I was talking about. You've got this key up here that'll make your corners sharp again. And I probably could just take my select tool right here and I can select, whoops, notice I'm selecting the big rectangle instead of the ones I want. So hold on just a sec, grab that select tool. I'm gonna make sure I save really quick. And I am going to just draw a selection around everything that's on that palette. And now when I go to the square, I can go like this, and it should square all of my corners at one time. Ta-da! So make sure you get familiar with that selection tool because you can do multiple objects. And if you wanted to make all of the objects come together, you could go up to Object and group them, and now you'll notice if I go to move any of them, they're all grouped together, which is kind of fun. Now notice these handles, right? I can make that group larger or smaller. Remember, these will adjust it, and if I hold down Control key, it's going to maintain the proportion of my square. Okay, and this new layer is going to be called Circles and Ellipses. And it's going to come above the current layer, as it said there in that box. And you'll notice that now I can hide my rectangles and squares, okay? As long as you have at least one square and at least one rectangle and you've changed the colors on them, I'm happy for the points there. Gonna hide that by closing the eye. Now I'm gonna work on circles and ellipses. So I'm gonna grab this circle tool, save, it's my circle, and to draw a circle, you're gonna have to hold down Control. So hold Control and then start dragging. I am going to change my stroke style. I'm just gonna make that a 2. I can still see the outline a little bit, and I'm gonna change the stroke paint. Or no, I'll keep this. Yeah, let's change the stroke paint. I'm gonna make it this purple color by holding down Shift. And then I wanna change the fill, saving constantly, and I will change that to red. I just have to click on the red. So I should have that purple outline or stroke and the red fill, and I've got a circle. And I can actually play around with that too, but I'm just gonna click on it. I'm gonna go Control Copy, Control C, and then I will go Control V and it'll paste another one on there. Grab that Transform tool and it's selected, and now I can move this one. I think, do I want to overlay it? Sure, why not? I am going to play around with some of the actual buttons on there by clicking on that circle tool again. So let's grab these handles and see what they do. Here's the round one. Okay, so it's making an arc because my cursor is in towards the center of the circle. If I grab that round one and take my cursor on the outside and move it, I can make a Pac-Man mouth. Waka, 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 waka. These right here are just gonna be, they're gonna drag it and they're gonna change the proportions, right? So I can make it rather than a circle. But remember, you do have to have one circle, so leave one on there. Now here's what I was talking about with the transparency. Let's go ahead and make this circle a little bit transparent so we can see the red one behind it. Click Save. And what I'll do is I will take that purple color for the fill of it. I'm just going to click on it, go with that purple color to fill it, and then I'm going to make the stroke red by holding down Shift and clicking. So now on this one I have the red stroke and the purple fill, which is the opposite of the other.
Hey, Mom.
For emphasis, I think I'm just going to make that stroke a little bigger. And it has not changed colors, I can tell now. Okay, so I pressed Shift and the red, and it turned to the color that I wanted it. So sometimes if you have that stroke size a little too small, you can't really tell if it's making the changes or not. I have to press Save a lot on Inkscape, otherwise sometimes it kind of seems to go into a freeze mode and doesn't really do what I want it to. So it's kind of important that you're blowing things up big enough that you can kind of see what's going on. Now I'm going to select this Pac-Man. Just save, make sure you have that selection tool and then click on it. And I want to make it a little transparent. So I am going to decrease the opacity. And when I do that, now you can see what I mean by transparency. I can see that circle behind it, which is pretty cool. You can also remember do that with the entire layer. So if I turn on my rectangles and squares layer and I decide that I want to take my circles and ellipses and I make that less transparent, you'll notice now I can see through my circle to the one underneath it. And I kind of like that. So I will keep it like that just to demonstrate those skills. Save. Make sure you're working in the right layer. When you have two layers selected, it's easier to accidentally switch to one of the other layers and start working in the wrong layer. In my circles and ellipses layer, I want to select this ellipse Pac-Man, and so I'm going to click on it and click again, and that's where I get the rotation handles. So the first time you click, you get those handles that stretch it. The second time you click, you get rotation handles, so I can actually rotate that guy around, and then I can move him again. There. So just fooling around, making sure you have everything that you need. So do I have circles and ellipses, and I've changed the colors? So I do have a square on there, I've got a circle on there, and I also have an ellipse. I made it into a Pac-Man too, and I changed the color, so that part's done. Now I need several stars, and I've got to change the number of points and make some abstract shapes with the handles, and I'll show you how to do that next. So let's create a new layer, and we're going to call that one Stars. Add, and I just like kind of closing up the layers that I'm not using so I can focus on what I'm doing. So next, stars. Click on your star shape and just go ahead and drag a star. You'll notice it maintains the qualities that I had from the last star I drew. You can click on your transform tool here and move it. I can change the color or the number of points. I can also change the colors and everything just like I've done before. So there's a pretty bright yellow star. If you wanted to, for example, get rid of the stroke on there, you could just click that X and then you can click Save. Now I'm just going to go ahead and draw a new star. So clicking on my star tool, there's another one, and the reason why I did that is because I said that I needed stars with different numbers of points. So here, this one has 5. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to change the number of corners to 7. Then I'm going to draw another one. Notice that this one has 7, right? Let's change the color. Let's find a yellow color palette over here. I'm not crazy about that color palette. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to my fill wheel, and I'm gonna just get a little oranger colored tone, and change the number of corners. And this time I think I'm gonna play around a little bit with this inside handle. Notice what I can do with it. I can also lengthen those or make them shorter. So let's draw another star, and notice that it is going to maintain the number, the color, and the number of points. So I can change the number of points. I can actually put a lot on there, and I'll change the color ever so slightly. So that's pretty fun. I'll make another star, and this time I think I'll make this one black. So I'm just going to click on the black. That last color wasn't black, so let's click on way down here at the end. Now the reason why I'm having a problem here is because the last time I drew a shape, and all of these are like that, the opacity, when I was playing around with the opacity, it maintained that as a default. So let's grab this selection tool, and let's just select everything in there, and let's increase our opacity to 100%. Now look at how bright and vivid all those colors are. So if you notice that things just don't seem to be as bright as they should, check to see if you accidentally have changed the opacity, either here in your fill and stroke box or on your layer. I noticed that my star layer was at 100% opacity, so it wasn't that, right? But if we go into my circle and ellipses, you'll notice that that layer I do have a decreased opacity on. Now I want to go to my stars layer, make sure you're working in the right layer, and I'm going to select this black star that I made, and I'm just going to I want to show you what it looks like when you play with the handles holding down some of the keys on the keyboard. So make sure that your star tool is selected, and now you have those handles. Now hold down the shift key and adjust a handle. See what happens when you hold shift? Ooh, such pretty things happening there, huh? So that's fun. Shift. I'm trying to get one that where's the one that I just, every time I see it, I'm like, yeah. I'll go with that one. There's also the outside handle. I'm not holding down shift, but if I do hold down shift, this is what happens on that outside handle. If you feel like you've gone too far, you can hit Control Z and go back, or you can hit Control Y to redo it. I do like that. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my transform, and I am going to hold down Control to maintain the proportions of it, and I'm just going to make it smaller and then grab it and move it, hopefully, if I can get Inkscape to work. There we go. Lovely. And I'll do another shape. So notice, whoops, gotta select your star tool. When I go to drag it, it maintains that exact same shape. So I could draw a whole bunch of those in different sizes. How fun, like little doilies, right?